Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am St. Louis' Pastor Paul, and today I'm going to talk to you about something that I've been excited to share for a long time. It's an idea that I've been thinking about, but I just need to start it, because otherwise it's never going to get done. And it's basically the concept that Christianity is supposed to be more like being a gang member than it is being a member of a charitable organization. And what I mean by that is that many people think Christianity is about being a good person, and they view Christianity as the do-gooders. You know, you join a charitable organization. Generally, it's a bunch of rich people that show up and give money to a cause, and they feel good about themselves. Christianity actually is supposed to be more about Christians taking care of each other and having a brotherhood that only adversity seems to create. Kind of like the brotherhood in arms among soldiers. And, just as gangs have soldiers and gangs take care of each other, that's what Christianity is, in a way, supposed to be. Now, there are definitely differences. The violence in gangs is not something you find in churches, but I just want to point out that in America, church has become the do-gooders that go to church and they do good for others out there. In the Bible, it's very clear that there are no good people. In John 2:24 says Jesus on his part did not entrust himself to them because he knew all people and needed no one to bear witness about man, for he himself knew what was in a man. Jesus knew that men were evil, and so he did not need someone to tell him about them. Also, in Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." All right? So the Bible is clear here also that all have sinned. Let's see. There is none righteous. No, not one. All right, if you know part of a Bible verse, but not the whole thing, type it into Google and it'll find it for you. So Romans 3:10, so even in the same chapter, Romans 3:10 says, "As it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one." So again, Bible is very clear. Men are evil. Even, yes, even people who become Christians, yes, we get the Holy Spirit and we begin to enjoy doing things that are good for us and that people generally call good. And so Christians tend to become better people than they used to be. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're better people than other people. Sometimes people were better than us to begin with, and so yes, we're better than we used to be, but we're not necessarily better than other people out there. And so the Bible is very clear that Christians are not good people. Unfortunately, I think in the modern American faith, we think of Christianity as the whole point is being a good person. Well, the whole point, according to Jesus, is to, 1, you love God, 2, you love others. Okay? And that you don't have to be a quote-unquote good person to do that. You can love God and love others and still be evil. Now, yeah, the better a person you are, the better you're going to be able to love God and others. But the point is that even good Christians have skeletons in their closet. And that's made very apparent by looking throughout the Bible at faithful believers in God like Abraham. Actually, blanking on Abraham right now, but I know Moses was a murderer. Moses, killed an Egyptian. You have King David, who murdered a man. Okay, David's wonderful. I mean, here's a guy that the Bible calls a man after God's own heart. David has an affair with a married woman, and then to cover it up, he kills her husband. So he's a murderer and an adulterer. And this is someone that the Bible calls a man after God's own heart. I've never killed anyone. I've never had an affair. So this is really crazy to think that King David is a man after God's own heart. And I don't know if God would consider me to have the faith that David had. And so you see that in the Bible, people are this strange mix of faith and pursuit after God, but also filled with sin. The same is true of the Apostle Paul, the guy that I'm named after, the guy that he lived 2,000 years ago. The Apostle Paul, I'm named after him. He was a murderer. Again, I've never killed anyone. But would I dare to compare my faith to the Apostle Paul? No, not at all. Will he enter the kingdom of heaven before me? Certainly. Will he have a larger reward in heaven than me? Yes. And so what I want to point out is that throughout the Bible, there are these huge, monumental figures of faith that have terrible skeletons in their closets. Even today, Martin Luther King Jr., who many people consider him to be the best English preacher of the 20th century. And I would agree with that. Martin Luther King Jr., I believe, is the greatest preacher of the 20th century. Did you know that he had affairs like crazy? Here's a man that led the civil rights movement, a preacher, a theologian, died for the cause he believed in. You could very easily call him a martyr, and yet he regularly slept with women other than his wife. And so I just want to point out that Christians aren't good people in the way that we would traditionally think about them as being good. And that's one of the reasons why I would say that Christianity is not like joining a charitable organization, because you join a charitable organization, and part of the reason they have dinners and stuff like that is so that everyone can show up to the dinner and look at each other and say, oh, look, we're all a room full of good people. Christianity's kind of the opposite, or should in some ways be the opposite, where you come to church and you say, oh, look, a group of broken, wretched people that God has redeemed and God is restoring, and God is certainly growing their faith and growing their character and making them better than they were. But we're still filled with sin, and we're still piles of trash. But we're pieces of trash made in the image of God that God is restoring to glory. So that's just one reason why a church is more like being in a gang than being in a charitable organization. Next time we're going to look at the brotherhood between gang members and the brotherhood between Christians, because that's where I think this point really starts to shine through. Thank you guys for talking. I hope you look forward to hearing more. Have a good one.